Hello friends, you're with Lonesome Gamer, and today I'm gonna start 7 Ages. Again, it's published by the Australian design group. I'm not sure who is actually the designer of this. Yeah, it's not written here. But anyway. So this is one I want to try again, and I already did that. So now with all this corona crisis going on all over the world, especially here in Europe and in Germany, so my work is shut down. I work in a museum and that is closed obviously right now. So I got a lot of time sitting at home. And I got a lot of time for board gaming. So I thought, hey, I want to do something big. I want to use that time and really start a big game. Some of these games where you say, okay, I will do these games one day if I have the time. And this is now the time. This is gonna be as good as it gets. I mean, maybe when I don't have to work anymore, when I'm 65 or something, or 70, maybe then I'm gonna have the time again that I have now. Anyway, I thought about doing something really big like Europa Universalis or maybe a World at War or something like that, and I started reading the rules, and yeah, I'm just not in the mood to do that. Maybe when I have time, I'm gonna do that. I don't know. It's not just a matter of time, You really, I don't know. You need to be in the mood. You need to have the right motivation to do that. And so I spent about a week or so reading rules of a few big games. And it turned out in the end, no, I'm not gonna do that. So, and in the end I came back to this one, and I already did that. I played it, I think, once on camera, and I played it once with a group, and we met every 2 weeks for, I think it was about 3 or 4 months. And we actually played it from the beginning to the very end. And it was a great experience. It was one of my most interesting multiplayer experiences that I've ever had. So yeah, and because I did that already, I don't want to go into the rule state details and all of that again. And I'm also not going to go through, I don't know, through every single action and turn and so on. I want to basically just explain the history, how it plays out, just show you the result of my gamings and the different stages and all. So I remember when I did that the first time, when I did that video, it was about close to 40 videos. I don't want to do it that way this time. I'm not sure, maybe 10, 15, maybe I'll end up with 2 or 3 videos per age, something like that. Maybe even in the first ages I can do the first age in 1 video or so, because they're not, well, we'll see about all these things, right? But this is what I'm trying to do. Maybe I'm not going to finish it, I don't know. I might also do a few big breaks, because by the end of the month, for example, I got some other things to do, and so maybe I'm going to have a break and then come back to this, or maybe I'm going to do some totally different game in between. But I want to try to see how far we can get, and yeah, if I don't enjoy it anymore, I'm just going to finish it. But at least let's watch the first few thousand years of human history, and let's see how far we get. So I've set up the game, and just want to give you the opportunity to enjoy the empty map. It is so beautiful. For me, at least, this is one of my favorite maps. I think it looks gorgeous. I love the projection that it kind of, that you can basically walk around the Arctic areas, North Pole. The Antarctic is not on the map, which is fine, I guess. We definitely don't need that one. But yeah, you really can kind of move around the globe, and I think that is a really cool idea, and it looks just wonderful. So got our glory track here. You know that if you've watched the other video, and yeah, I strongly recommend to do that. I'm not going to use a few of my house rules here. I'm going to follow the official rules basically, and see if that works out maybe better. I cannot step back any further actually because of the lightning. That's another point here. I'm not gonna, if I only give you a quick insight each day, I'm not gonna set up all my lights and all that. I hope this is pretty much good enough what we have here, and to avoid all kinds of mirroring on the acrylic effect here, reflections and all that, I had to do it the other way around. So I'm basically standing now between the table and my shelf, and usually I film from the other side. So, but I think that might be a little better now, because as I said, there are less reflections because on the other side of the room there is more space. Otherwise I'm, standing right behind my shelf here. And you're going to see my shelf then on the board, which obviously sucks. So here I got all my cards, and the reason I placed them like this is because the problem is that you can play these cards, many of them, anytime during the game. These are event cards, and some cards can be played in specific situations. And so I kind of try to, and I already did that in my earlier game. Every player, and I'm playing a 6-player game by the way, every player here, we go from up to down, and we have the different phases. So this is the Start Empire phase, then we have here our production phase, and here we have the trade phase, and this is for the battle here. This is your classic civilization phase where you can play all kind of event cards, and this is more for the glory, harvest, glory and destiny phase here. So we basically follow the sequence of play from left to right here, and I'm gonna simply check, okay, are there any interesting cards that someone might want to play during this specific phase? Otherwise I have to go through the stack of cards of each player. I got to take it in my hand, turn it around, check the cards, and see if there is something that a player might want to do this in this specific phase of the game turn. And in this way I can see it right away, and I don't have to be too afraid. Of course there are some cards like that can be played on different occasions or something, and one of, or let's say on 2 or more occasions. And well, if I forget a good card from time to time, well, so be it. Okay, so yeah, I think I'm ready to start that thing now, and we'll see how far we get. So back at the end of the first round, and well, first civilizations have entered history. The first one actually were the Kushites, or the Nubians. I guess the Nubians. I don't know the difference between them, and I don't know. I'm going to call them the Nubians because I don't know the others. And they're sitting obviously here. And they already made quite a bit of glory. So one for the hometown, one for the biggest in Africa, and two for the biggest in the world, because they are first in turn order. That gives them always then in a tie the lead, and therefore right now they made 4 glory points, which is pretty awesome for a good for a start. Okay, and second player couldn't start an empire. He didn't have any cards that match the first age. Third player could start the Babylonians. They're sitting right here, and they come with a leader, Hammurabi. He's an administrator and a tactician. And they get a point for their home country, 2 points for Asia. They don't have any cultural achievements, so I don't think they get any points there. I mean, 0 for everyone, I don't think that is reasonable. But they they didn't spend all their money, so they are also the richest civilization. So overall, that also gives them 4 points. Then we see the early Finns, and yeah, I didn't see them in my games until now, but in this game, well, the cards showed up this way. Definitely not the best civilization. They don't give you that much points, or they don't have that much potential. So this time they made 1 for the home and 1 for being the biggest in Europe. And obviously they start up here in Finland. The advantage is they gain glory even if they control tundra. Usually tundra doesn't give you any glory points if you control that, but they do. And by the way, the Nubians, in the same way, they gain glory points for controlling desert. In addition, they can move through tundra easier. Then we have as another starting empire, and I gotta say this is actually the empire I really don't like, because it seems nearly like some kind of fantasy empire, the Amazons. I've heard sometimes that there was kind of an empire where female horseback warriors or so were, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think if this is actually a myth, and I have a problem to call these Amazons, to be honest. As I said, it sounds a little bit too fantastic to me. So, and they're not bad. They get well, at the beginning they're not too good though. They only get 1 point for the home, and that's it, because they are so far behind in turn order. But they start with a leader, Xena, and she's a philosopher and a tactician. The last empire that started is the Empire of the Chu, right here. And they are sitting over here in China, obviously. They're in a pretty good position. You can see there are lots of fertile areas nearby. So if they're lucky, and I think there is at least one other Chinese empire that also starts early, but maybe they're lucky and they can, and it doesn't show up or whatever. So maybe they can start something big there. And right now they get 1 for their home country, 1 for being the biggest in China. So that gives them 2 points. Okay, yeah, that was the first turn. And I already made a mistake here. I forgot the leader abilities. This guy comes as an administrator, Hammurabi. So the units he buys cost one, the infantry unit he buys cost him one less. Which means he could actually buy more infantry units. And yeah, so, well, that's what happened. He ended up with more infantry units. And over here, and that is a real big deal, she is a philosopher, Xena. And that means when it comes to the glory thing, if she is tight with other empires, with the values, then she, or if there's a tie with other empires, then she will always win that tie. Which is obviously in the first round a big deal, because it means usually the guy who is first in turn order wins the tie, but not in this case. So that means he was only second in the world, so he only gets 3 victory points. Babylonians, there was no change here, but for the Finns, they were basically only second in Europe, which means they only made a single victory point. And these guys now were first in the world, which gives them 2 victory points, and they were also first in progress, which gives them an additional victory point. So they made now 4 victory points with their home area instead of, I think they were at 1 or so. So that is actually a big deal. So we are at the end of the next turn, and well, nothing terribly interesting. Oh, well, I mean, okay, the empires basically that started expanded. A new empire showed up here, the Harappans, controlled by the last player who didn't have an empire. And they're interested in being big in India and in being a progressive society, which kind of sucks because obviously they started behind the others. But their trade value isn't too bad. On the other hand, the only one they can trade with right now is the Babylonians because of their range. They get a +1, by the way, when it comes to trade range. So they are allowed to trade with the Babylonians, but the Babylonians have a trade bonus of, I think, yeah, that's a trade bonus of +1, while these guys only have a +0. So it's gonna not be easy for them to actually, to progress. But hey, I think they're gonna try it anyway. Yeah, apart from that, we've seen the empires expand. Babylonians, Nubians here. They're still controlling Egypt, hoping to do that as long as possible. Are enforcing, kind of increasing their forces here so that this guy doesn't use his tactician and then moves in here. And now it's going to be much harder for them to do so. The Amazons did spread out here over these fertile areas here into the south, Thracia, and then maybe to Asia Minor. We'll see about that. Doesn't count toward Europe. So I think, yeah, no, they don't care about Europe. They just want to be big in the world. Which they were not. I mean, they were not super successful. They hold now 5 areas. The Babylonians hold 6. The Chu also holds 6 areas. They control these 3 wheat, which is super powerful. They're going to have a massive income. And the early Finns up here, well, I mean, they basically just suck. They make only their single point with the homeland. It's going to be extremely hard for them to compete with the Amazons for Europe, simply because of the philosopher leader here. And yeah, I mean, the world, unlikely. You can see here they give him an extra point, and he's hoping being able to start something new as soon as possible. So, the end of turn 3, I guess. And, well, here we see an expansion of these guys. The Harappans now controlling India. Their hope was to get closer to the Chinese so that they could trade with the Chinese, because they're not that good. They are not that good in trading, but they're still not quite within range, so that didn't work out. I forgot that entering the mountains costed 2. I wanted to end up here somewhere and then get into range, but it didn't work out. By the way, the Harappans have a +1 range, so I think range is equal to the age, if I'm not totally wrong. Maybe it's equal to the age +1. I gotta check that, but I think it's just equal to the age. Anyway, I think they're out of range, but they might still try to trade, maybe with one of these guys down here. So you can see here the Babylonians have a big problem. Sumerians started, the same guy who controls the Jews started now the Sumerians. Right in the middle here, they killed Hammurabi, who fought a desperate battle with just his palace guard or what, and they totally destroyed him. They did a civilized action, the other guys, and by the way, they came in with a fortress here, so it's going to be hard to take that back. The Babylonians chose a civilized action because they didn't know what to expect, and they're sitting now here in a new capital with a new leader, a philosopher and scientist, which doesn't really help them a lot. The problem is also that they definitely want to control their home territory. Right now they didn't lose any points because they're still pretty big in Asia, so they kind of even out. But the problem is, if they lose, I think, just one more province or so, and it looks pretty much like that. They're even not the biggest in Asia, or they're even not the second biggest in Asia anymore. At least I doubt that, because the Harappans are before them in turn. However, they got a philosopher. Well, anyway, let's say they just lose 2 provinces, which is likely. So I can see the Babylonians disappear pretty soon, although I'm not totally convinced. The funny thing is that this guy, the player of the Babylonians, also holds the Assyrians. So he might start the Assyrians, maybe waiting 1 turn or something, and then when these guys kind of spread out, I can start the Assyrians and fight back. This is something I thought of, but therefore I thought maybe I can reconquer Mesopotamia and then take the remaining Babylonians and move back, and also take the Mesopotamia back from the Assyrians, and then the Assyrians can try to take this area here and the Babylonians can try to stay down here. There is a lot of potential here with the money and these artifact points, so I'm hesitating to discard the Babylonians. On the other hand, yeah, we'll see. I mean, if I start losing glory, it becomes obviously really an issue. The early Finns are actually performing pretty well. They did a production action, and because we see also chaos in here, so basically what happened to the player of the Babylonians, he did himself to the owner of the Amazon. So he started a faction, the Cimmerians here, right at the home area of the Amazons in Ukraine. And again, a leader, Xena, died in a desperate battle. And so, yeah, this is clearly a problem now for the Amazons too. And they are in a similar position as the Babylonians because they want to also control their home city. But I don't see anybody helping them here. So, yeah, I think the Amazons will probably really go away because they already lost a glory point, and that's definitely bad. So I guess the Amazons will go away, which brings the early Finns in an interesting position because they are now the strongest power in Europe. They control their home territory, and that gives them 2 points, which isn't bad, you know. I mean, usually that is not a really. This is not a good power at all, but hey, looks like they're scoring points here, which is definitely nice. Yeah, the Chu expanding here, becoming the best power right now. They're scoring their full points. They control their home territory. They control the biggest part of China, biggest of Asia, and even biggest of the world with 6 countries. They did a production action. They got an insane income of 21 with these 3 wheat locations. They could buy chariots now. And yeah, by the way, we see now the first chariots, the first cavalry units here. Most of the empires entered now. Oh, actually, yeah, the cavalry units were already available here, and now now these the ships are available. The small ships, the galleys, and okay. So yeah, if they're gonna maneuver and spread out even more, then I think, yeah, they're gonna be the biggest civilization in the world. And as long as no other faction starts in China, and I'm not sure if this is even possible in the first era, then they might make a good amount of points. Nubians doing solid. They expanded, made a few points, but I'm seeing the Egyptians over there at the horizon. So not sure how long they will survive. But okay, cool. Yeah. So I did the next turn and a lot of stuff happened. First of all, 3 new empires actually started. And we've seen the Egyptians come into play here with Tutmosis, and they easily destroyed the 2 Nubian guys that's sitting there. Tutmosis is a builder, which helps him in constructing cities, and he's also a strategist, which basically allows him to double move with an army, with a single army, the army with this guy, during a maneuver action. We have here the Phoenicians, and by the way, this guy, the Egyptians are controlled by the same guy, player 2, who controls the Harappans. So he's in a pretty good position here, because these are 2 pretty solid, pretty solid empires. And by the way, I realized I forgot the gain glory step, and I think I want to do that. Okay, and you also have these glory cards, which can be really brutal. So he's got the I am glorious card, I'm truly glorious card for the early Finns who are doing awesome right now. That would double their glory, and they would gain 6 glory points. But another player, the guy here who controlled the Amazons and actually discarded them after their conflict here with the Cimmerians, He plays now Glory pour moi. Play at the start of Harvest Glory. Only the target empire earns glory. So he doesn't control an empire, but still, that's a good card for him because it prevents the other players from running away. So if he plays that on a crappy empire, that could be actually a pretty good idea. So for example, he plays that on the Nubians. And because the Nubians don't control their home area any longer, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, they lose 1 point. They are the biggest one in Africa. That gives them 1 point, so they don't gain any glory at all. So that's the perfect card. So let me see. We gotta do that in a right way. That card was actually played first. Okay. Now I'm not sure. Maybe this guy has a visor, which allows him to... No, actually this card was placed first, but it doesn't really matter. The visor allows you to grab a card from the discard pile at any time, which is pretty awesome. On the other hand, these are the Carthaginians. I think you want to keep that card to start the Carthaginians because he doesn't have any... Yeah, absolutely, that's a good one. So, let's continue. What happened? The Phoenicians enter play right here. And they also destroyed a Babylonian unit. And they're sitting now here, and they can, by the way, most of the empires can now build ships, which is kind of sweet. And the Phoenicians, they want to be big on the sea. That is their big goal, and they also want to be, they want to do fine in progress. They got a very interesting ability. They can basically bribe attackers so that they won't actually do their attack. So for every unit that attacks them, if they pay them a buck, the attack won't happen. That's pretty cool because what that basically means is they could, for example, only leave a single unit in their hometown, totally focus on the sea areas, which also give you a nice income, and in that way they don't have to be too afraid to kind of secure their home city, and they can just pay for the attacking units. That might be interesting, and I think I might want to go with that strategy actually. In addition to that, ships cost only $3 for me, which is another real cool factor. The third empire that started were the Assyrians, and they destroyed another one of the Babylonians, and that is one player, and actually he has now the third empire, the first player who controls 3 empires, the Babylonians, but their hosts, the Cimmerians, which are also doing pretty poorly, and the Assyrians. And well, I mean, this is in general a problematic situation here now. So the idea is maybe to somehow work together with the Babylonians and the Assyrians to destroy the Cimmerians. But I am totally not sure if this will work out. The Babylonians, now that they also lost Syria, they are so weak, and it's going to be hard for them to recover. Also with Egypt on their side, we'll see about that. A few other funny things happened during this specific turn, and it's a shame that the glory didn't. Nobody could harvest glory. Actually, the early Finns are at the moment super successful. They are the biggest in the world. They're the biggest in Europe. They're just doing awesome. So I really like that fact, right? It's really funny. They managed to get to Denmark here, to Sweden. They're really doing well, but sadly this time it didn't pay out. The Cimmerians, it's going to be hard for them to score any points, so they might not stay for long in the game. They gain points for being number 1 in Europe and number 3 in the world. It's going to be hard. They got, as a competition, these early Finns here, and in addition, the Chu. I mean, maybe they can make it to number 3. That might be an option. The Chu are doing great, but they're not quite at the top. They did a civilize action, and they played the loyal mercenary, which allowed them to pick a leader. They picked a builder because their goal is to really go a long-term strategy. And so I thought about building a lot of cities as soon as possible. So yeah, I was able to build 3 cities, which is totally amazing. And in addition to that, the player holding the Chu did a destiny action, and he ended up with a Qin, which is really cool because he's not going to start the Qin because they kind of compete with the Chu, but controlling them really, you know, and not playing them, taking them out of the game is really a very valuable factor for the Chu, because that kind of leaves them, for now at least, dominance in China, maybe for the next ages. So that is a super strong card. Yeah, another funny thing happened, and the guy who controls the Egypt, he played a pestilence on the Nubians. So, and actually the Nubians were kind of lucky, but the pestilence only hit Nubia very hard. All the units there were destroyed, and he was lucky that the others weren't killed too. It was very likely that that would happen, but well, it didn't. But the problem is that the Nubians will not score any points as long as they don't recapture their home area, which is super unlikely now in that position. So I'm pretty sure the Nubians will get discarded, and that gives, of course, Egypt now control over Africa, and, well, they are the biggest in Africa, let's say that way. They don't exactly control Africa. But anyway, they are the biggest in Africa, which gives them a point, which is obviously a good thing for them. I think that's pretty much all that happened during this turn. And, well, actually there was a civilized action here too. A few cities showed up, and we found a tactician, which did not really help this guy. He's not a fighter. He wanted to have a scientist, which would help him in trade, but yeah, he couldn't get one, so bad luck here. So next turn, and it's empires galore. We have, yeah, I think 4 new empires. So Carthage started here, which was possible because the Phoenicians are in play. Otherwise, they can only start in the second era. The Etruscans started here, and that again made it possible for the Romans to get started right here. And there was also an immediate attack. The Romans have an extra free maneuver in the first round, and their infantry are all only 1 gold. So they have a massive army, and they started moving right against the Etruscans. But the Etruscans had a treachery card and played that, which simply means that the Romans have to retreat, and they kind of lost the battle. But they didn't lose their troops. The Etruscans will not be able to stand here against the Romans. But that maneuver gave the player 2 glory points, because he is, he is the first. He has his home area, and because he was in turn order before the Romans, he was also the first in Italy, the biggest in Italy. So it's 2 glory points for that guy. And that maneuver alone was worth the card, I think. By the way, the Carthaginian player is the same guy as, well, the one who actually lost the Amazons. So he started a new empire, and it's his only empire, Carthage. The Etruscan player is the guy who controls also the Chu up here. So, well, probably will lose the Etruscans, but a few points, and you can see the gray player, that's him. He is already quite a bit in the lead here. The Chu are making a ton of points. It's the best empire at the moment, and probably for a while, I guess. The Roman player is the same guy as the Phoenician player. And yeah, and of course I forgot there was a time ripple, which allowed an event card, which allowed to bring an empire into play which can only start 1 age earlier or later. So the Japanese, who can usually only start in age 2, come now into play, and there they are. This is an excellent empire, usually. I mean, they are always very, very good. They get a point for their home area. They get a point for wheat, for each wheat they hold, and they hold a wheat right at the beginning. 2 points for being the richest, and 2 points for having the most sea areas in the world. Now, right at the moment, they have a little bit of a problem. They started -4, so at the very beginning, progress now 1 space here, and so they cannot build ships, which kind of sucks for them because, yeah, there's a lot of richness. There is not that much. There's only limited room for expansion, let me say it that way, and they're not too interested in doing so, by the way. So, but of course, if they cannot build ships, it's bad for them because they cannot fulfill this requirement. But one day they will be able to, and until then they can save some money and simply score points like that. And actually, right in the first turn, they already scored 3 points because they did that. They saved some money. That made them the second richest player, and so that gave them 3 points right away. Pretty good. So 4 new empires. Early Finns were still expanding. No, actually they were producing, strengthened their position here, hoping to prevent this guy from starting to attacking them. And well, probably the most interesting thing what happens was a battle down here. The Sumerians were destroyed completely. The Assyrians attacked Mesopotamia, and it was a close battle, but in the end the Sumerians were destroyed. And who was their leader? I don't remember. He's already gone, already lost in history. Nobody cares about him anymore. No, it was Sargon, and he actually died. He was killed in battle. The Babylonians, they have a new capital over here now. And they actually built the Temple of Diana. And because they want these artifacts that give them points, that's why they're eager to do that. It's good to get rid of disorder, but they're playing that for the point. And yeah, I actually forgave them to give a point. I think whenever you play such an artifact, you automatically get 1 glory point. So it's this guy here. And that I forgot. And then he got a point for the harvest glory thing, but he had to subtract 1 because he still doesn't control his home area. So I got to do some fucked up maneuver here. I got to move out of this area, maybe attack these guys, the Phoenicians. but I got to leave one guy in here, and then I got to go with the other guys back in and attack that one guy. The Assyrians and the Babylonians are all controlled by the same player. I think Babylon is a pretty good empire, so that's why I want to hold these guys. They have a good potential to make easy points. You know, they can play for money for these artifacts and their home city. That gives them 3 points. That's pretty cool. And I can try to protect them with the Assyrians. We'll see how that works out. Okay. Okay, so actually we're through the first age. The Harappans entered the second age. They did a successful trade action this turn against the Chu, which gave them a little bit of a push. 2 spaces ahead, and now they are in lead, at least progress-wise. Let's do a little recap of the round. Well, the Etruscans were killed here. The Phoenician homeland, we had actually a tie here. So in the end, the Assyrians attacked the Phoenicians. Both armies completely wiped each other out, which means this is now a neutral area, which is bad, of course, for the Phoenicians, because they lose 1 point if they do not control their homeland. On the other hand, the Assyrians also did expect more, but the Phoenicians had a mesmerizer which kind of helped them in the defense here. Sadly, it was not quite enough. You can see here Carthage did expand quite a bit. They also have now here a land unit in Andalusia. The Cimmerians were discarded. They didn't help him at all. Egypt. They built the Great Pyramids, the Pharaoh's Lighthouse, that brought them to the top of the cultural civilizations. And I think these guys expanded also a little further, although I'm not sure. I don't really know that actually. So that's pretty much what happened on the map. Most successful player at the moment is the gray player, who is on control of the Chu. And the Chu is also one of the most successful civilizations. Biggest in the world, biggest in Asia, biggest in China, obviously, and in control of their homeland. So that gives them, but it gives them only 4 points, because they only get 1 for being biggest in the world and 1 for being biggest in Asia. But still, they make 4 points. Nobody makes more than that. The Harappans also make 4 points. 2 for being the most advanced in technology. 1 for being the biggest in India, and 1 for holding their homeland. And the Japanese, I think... No, actually not. The Carthaginians, they also score 4 points at the moment, because they control their homeland. They have the biggest fleet with 3 ships, but that can change quickly. And they also are they get 2 for that, 2 for having the biggest fleet. And they also control at the moment the second largest area of Europe, because they are allowed to count the adjacent sea areas. And that means they control technically 3 areas of Europe, which is behind the Finns, the second largest area. So that means they get at the moment also 4 points. And yeah, so Carthage, Harappans and the Chu are at the moment the best performing empires. Okay, so yeah, I guess this is a good end for this video. 1H, well, took me a while to play that. I'm not sure, maybe 8 hours or something like that. Starting empires takes a while, you know, you got to prepare everything and so on. Often you have a starting battle and something, and of course at the beginning of the game there is a lot of fluctuation. Empires go away, new empires start, and all that. So yeah, I'm curious what the next age gives us. Well, I guess the age of empires. And yeah, we're gonna go into this. Hope to see you in the next video or on lonesomegamer.com.